Good morning, everybody. Welcome to my presentation. It's me, Olivia Tison, and my presentation is called How Do I Introduce Myself in Different Contexts? And it is taken from a textbook called Entre Culturas Uno, and it's the Unidad Preliminar in this textbook that I have adapted for this unit redesign. So here's a brief overview. So although right now I'm a special education Spanish immersion teacher, I hope to someday be teaching Spanish 1 for 8th graders. They would be at the novice low level. They may have had some prior Spanish experience, depending if they're coming from different schools that offered Spanish, but for the most part, they are novice low learners. They could be heritage learners, and it is a diverse student body located in Minneapolis. So let's talk about this unit. So the old textbook from the unit offered this unit, and it was the Unidad Preliminar, and I have decided to title it Introductions. The old essential questions and guiding questions were combined into questions like, how widely used is Spanish in the world? How do I begin a conversation in Spanish? What strategies will help me communicate in Spanish? Which is largely why I named my thematic unit Introductions, but I decided to put it in context. So for example, my essential question is, how do I introduce myself in different contexts? And then the guiding questions are, where do people speak Spanish? How do I begin and end a conversation when meeting a Spanish speaker, depending on age and setting? What do people say and do when exchanging information in Spanish? As you can see, my questions are more geared towards context and to pragmatics, and I definitely have learned from you all in this class and Professor Shively, so thank you for that. Let's continue on. So I did try to incorporate all 5 standards of ACTFL, so I won't get into it too much now, but incorporating all 5 standards has really enriched this unit in the sense that kids are going to be obviously talking with each other, communicating with each other through introductions, but also having an element of culture and comparisons into understanding the differences between how people introduce themselves in English-speaking ways in the United States versus how people introduce themselves in Spanish-speaking communities across the world. Like I said, I'm not going to dive into this too much, but just so you're aware, there will also be a connections element of students making like a comic strip for a learning activity where they use Spanish magazines and cut people out and make an introduction based on that, as well as a communities element that is seen through my IPA, where students are actually going into the community, into our middle school, and presenting at the Hispanic Heritage Festival. So we'll talk more about that later. As for now, our objectives are as follows. There are 3 umbrella objectives. So identifying and expressing accurate Spanish-speaking places in the world, dates, and days of the week in Spanish through reading, writing, and oral communication. That is our first main objective. And underneath this, you'll see that this includes pronunciation of letters, countries, states, and territories, numbers 1 through 31, months, days of the week, and identifying the key vocabulary for introductions, which leads us to our second main objective, which is introduce. So this objective is basically making sure that students are able to introduce themselves and ask and answer basic questions to get to know others in Spanish through written and oral communication. So this objective involves the key vocabulary terms of Spanish greetings and goodbyes, and also involves students applying their knowledge of subject-verb agreement when it comes to verbs llamarse, estar, and ser with the subjects yo, tu, and usted, and with the pronouns me, tu, and su, as well as the question words como, cuando, and de donde. Our third main objective here is to compare how to introduce themselves to someone young, older, and much younger than themselves, and the pragmatics of responding to questions or ideas through writing and oral communication. So this includes gestures and expressions, tu versus usted, and the pragmatic words for responses. So this could include que padre, genial, bueno, these words that students may use in English when communicating with others and introducing themselves, but they need to be able to adapt and learn new words and new pragmatics for introducing themselves in Spanish. So as you can see, all of these objectives fit under the umbrella of my thematic unit of introductions and the main question of how do I introduce myself in different contexts. So now we'll be able to move on and see the old IPA here. So as you can see, this old IPA was asking students to travel to Spain for the summer, and then once they got to Spain, they had to choose a new school to attend by looking at an online advertisement and also by talking with their future teachers and listening to their new classmates converse. So I liked this old IPA because it brought up a lot of the key vocabulary and context, but I felt like it wasn't very authentic for a lot of the students I worked with in the past, because a lot of my students wouldn't be able to visualize themselves traveling to Spain, nor spending their summer actually going to school rather than like caring for younger siblings or having a job. So I moved on and actually developed a new IPA for this unit. So my new IPA's prompt is to represent a famous Spanish speaker at the Hispanic Heritage Festival at school. This is an annual festival that takes place in our library, and where for my IPA, students will be asked to represent a famous Spanish speaker to younger students. So how this is going to work is in the new IPA's interpretive task, they are going to be asked to choose 2 famous Spanish speakers and fill out graphic organizers on them from mini biographical blurbs. They'll also have to locate these speakers on the map. After they do this, the interpretive task, the teacher will be looking through the students' responses and will actually match students to a representative. So every student will be representing somebody different. In the old IPA, the interpersonal task was to introduce themselves to their teacher. One note on this interpersonal task was that this was actually a recording from a teacher. So there were no pragmatics and no really context given. So my new IPA for the interpersonal task includes a portion where students are not only conversing with the other representatives, but they're also conversing with the coordinator, me, for their IPA task and doing an introduction about who they are, where they're from, when's their birthday, and they are going to be required to use pragmatic elements. The last task is their presentation, which, as I mentioned, they'll be presenting who they are as that famous Spanish speaker at the Hispanic Heritage Festival. So let me show you what this looks like. So on the day of the IPA, students will receive this flyer, and it will be explained to them that they are going to be presenting a Spanish-speaking representative at the Hispanic Heritage Festival. They'll present to groups of 6th graders as they move through the library and move to different countries and regions of Spanish-speaking communities. So the first task is the interpretive, and students will be given a list of pictures and cognates, and during this unit we'll also talk about cognates. So they'll look through this and they'll say, okay, I want to read more about this person and this person. So just to give you an example, in this case they chose Shirley Cruz and Isabel Allende. So they're thinking, okay, I'm going to choose these 2 to represent at the Hispanic Heritage Festival. Their next task after reading through it is going to be filling out a graphic organizer. They'll say my first choice to represent is, let's say they wanted to represent Isabel Allende. They're going to write her full name, her origin, her age, month of her birthday, and also for exceed something that they're curious about her. And this has to be something related to her life, something that they saw here, something that might have been above her name, a cognate that they're just genuinely curious about. They'll also do this for their second choice option, and then at the end of the interpretive task, they are going to be filling out this to versus usted. So it says, should a young person use to or usted when addressing these representatives for the first time? All students will have the same one, and the answer should be usted, because they are in a formal setting, and because they are much younger than these representatives, they should be using usted. So for alignment for the actual geographical section of the IPA, they're going to circle where Isabel Allende and where Shirley Cruz are from, label 1 or 2, and then they're going to turn this assignment in, of course, after viewing the non-negotiable checklist. So they need to make sure that they read through this carefully. I will fill out the rubric. I will figure out who's going to be representing who, and then we'll move on to interpersonal task. But before I do that, let's just check to make sure. Okay, so this task met this unit's objectives of identifying and expressing. Okay, so now we're in the interpersonal task. So for this task, the coordinator reviewed, they get their representative, and they are going to fill out this name tag that has their name and how old they are. Then they are going to be told to brainstorm a list of questions that they think they'll be asked by the coordinator, some greetings, and they'll kind of use this as a brainstorming page. They won't be able to use this when they interview with me, the coordinator, for their interpersonal task, but they will be able to use this when walking around the classroom as they do their interpersonal activity with their classmates. So this is what their interpersonal activity looks like while I'm interviewing them. They have to find somebody who fits all of these. So someone who's from New York, someone who's older than 60 years old, and they are using pragmatics. They are using to and instead, looking at ages as they do this. At the end, they're going to use their meet and greet notes and actually go into groups based on different countries and different regions, which is just part of the activity. And so they'll look through their non-negotiable checklist, they'll look at their rubric, and then I will show you here that this met the introduce standard and the compare standard of the IPA. Finally, we'll get to the Hispanic Heritage Festival. During this, they will have a poster and Google Slides with them with 3 visuals that represent their representative. Here's their checklist, and here is their rubric. Finally, this met the introduce part of our unit. Any questions? Thank you so much.